Good evening, and welcome to Footnotes and Folly. I am Professor Reginald St. John Pemberton, and tonight we give you what may simply be the greatest 4th of July speech ever delivered, and it was not delivered on the 4th. The scene is July the 5th, 1852, Corinthian Hall, Rochester, New York. The Rochester Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society has invited Frederick Douglass, born enslaved in Maryland, escaped at 20, now the most famous black man in America, to give the customary Independence Day oration. He begins meekly, praises the fathers of 1776 as warmly as any orator alive, and then, halfway through, he turns on his audience with a single question that still draws blood: what have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? We read the complete oration, every word, in plain modern English. The rendering and the asides are my own. Let us begin.
Mr. President, friends and fellow citizens, anyone who could speak to this audience without feeling his confidence shake has stronger nerves than I have. I do not remember ever standing before any gathering as a speaker with more hesitation, or with less trust in my own ability, than I do today. A feeling has come over me that is not favorable to the use of my limited powers of speech. The task before me is one that, if it is to be done properly, requires much earlier thought and careful study. I know that apologies like this are usually considered weak and meaningless. I trust, however, that mine will not be taken that way. If I appear at ease, my appearance will greatly misrepresent me. The small experience I have had speaking at public meetings and country schoolhouses gives me no help on this occasion. The newspapers and posters say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. That certainly sounds large and out of the ordinary. It is true that I have often had the privilege of speaking in this beautiful hall, and of addressing many who now honor me by being here. But neither their familiar faces, nor the full measure of acquaintance I think I have with Corinthian Hall, frees me from embarrassment. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is very great, and the difficulties that had to be overcome in getting from that place to this one were by no means small. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as gratitude. You will not therefore be surprised if in what I have to say I show no elaborate preparation, and do not decorate my speech with any grand-sounding opening. With little experience, and with still less learning, I have been able only to gather my thoughts quickly and imperfectly. Trusting in your patient and generous indulgence, I will now proceed to place them before you.
A small biographical thunderclap is hidden in that modest sentence. Douglass was born Frederick Bailey in Maryland, taught himself to read in Baltimore after instruction was forbidden, and escaped in 1838 dressed as a sailor, carrying a free black seaman's papers. 14 years later he stands in Rochester, where his own home sheltered fugitives. That is not merely distance traveled, it is a republic put on trial.
For the purpose of this celebration, this is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. To you this day is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and the act of your great deliverance, and to the signs and wonders connected with that act and that day. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year in your national life, and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is only a tiny speck in the life of a nation. 70 years and 10 is the allotted time for individual men, but nations count their years by thousands. In this view, you are even now only at the beginning of your national career, still remaining in the childhood of your existence. I repeat, I am glad that this is so. There is hope in that thought, and hope is greatly needed under the dark clouds that hang low over the horizon. The eye of the reformer meets angry flashes that warn of disastrous times, but his heart may beat more lightly when he remembers that America is young, and that she is still in the impressible stage of her existence.
Observe the date with care. This was delivered on Monday, July 5, 1852, because the 4th fell on a Sunday, yes, but also because many black communities in the North mark the 5th by choice. Douglass is polite enough to call it your national birthday, and sharp enough to make that little pronoun do an alarming amount of work.
May he not hope that high lessons of wisdom, justice, and truth will still guide her destiny? If the nation were older, the patriot's heart might be sadder, and the reformer's brow heavier. Its future might be covered in gloom, and the hope of its prophets might die in sorrow. There is comfort in the thought that America is young. Great streams are not easily turned from channels worn deep through the course of ages. They may sometimes rise in quiet and stately majesty and flood the land, refreshing and fertilizing the earth with their mysterious powers. They may also rise in anger and fury, and carry away on their raging waves the accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship. Yet they gradually flow back to the same old channel, and move on as serenely as ever. But while a river may not be turned aside, it may dry up, and leave behind only the withered branch and the ugly rock, to tell in the sweeping wind of the abyss the sad story of departed glory. As it is with rivers, so it is with nations. Fellow citizens, I will not presume to dwell at great length on the memories that gather around this day. The simple story is that, 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now take pride, had not then been born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers regarded the English government as the home government, and England as the fatherland. That home government, you know, though it was a considerable distance from your home, used what it considered its parental authority to impose on its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limits as in its mature judgment it thought wise, right, and proper. But your fathers had not adopted the fashionable idea of this day, that government is infallible and that its acts are absolute. They dared to differ from the home government about the wisdom and justice of some of those burdens and restraints. In their excitement, they went so far as to declare the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need to say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully agrees with that of your fathers. Such a statement of agreement from me would not be worth much to anybody. It would certainly prove nothing about what part I might have taken if I had lived during the great controversy of 1776. To say now that America was right and England was wrong is exceedingly easy. Everybody can say it. The coward, no less than the noble brave, can speak lightly and fluently about the tyranny of England toward the American colonies. It is fashionable to do so. But there was a time when speaking against England, and in favor of the cause of the colonies, tried men's souls. Those who did so were regarded in their day as makers of trouble, agitators and rebels, dangerous men. To side with the right against the wrong, with the weak against the strong, and with the oppressed against the oppressor. Here is the merit, and this is the merit that, more than any other, seems unfashionable in our own day. The cause of liberty may be stabbed by the very men who glory in the deeds of your fathers. But I will proceed. Your fathers felt that the government back home had treated them harshly and unjustly. Like honest men and like men of courage, they earnestly sought relief. They petitioned and protested. They did it in a proper, respectful, and loyal way. No fair objection could be made to their conduct. But it did not achieve what they needed. They saw that they were being met with royal indifference, coldness, and contempt. Still, they kept going. They were not men who turned back. As an anchor grips more firmly when a ship is tossed by a storm, so the cause of your fathers grew stronger as it faced the cold winds of kingly displeasure. The greatest and best British statesmen admitted that their cause was just, and the highest eloquence of the British Senate came to its defense. But with that blindness which seems always to mark tyrants, ever since Pharaoh and his armies were drowned in the Red Sea, the British government kept demanding the very things the colonists complained about. We believe that even England now admits the madness of that course. But I fear the lesson is entirely lost on our present rulers. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not become mad, they certainly became restless under this treatment. They felt themselves to be victims of deep wrongs, wrongs that could not be cured while they remained colonies. For brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Right here, the idea of a complete separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, far more startling than we can understand from this distance in time. Of course, the timid and the cautious people of that day, as I have already suggested, were shocked and alarmed by it. Such people lived then, had lived before, and probably will always have a place on this planet. Their conduct toward any great change, no matter how great the good to be gained or the wrong to be corrected, can be predicted almost as exactly as the movements of the stars. They hate all change except silver, gold, and copper change. That kind of change they always strongly favor. In the days of your fathers, such people were called Tories. That name probably carried the same meaning as a more modern, though less pleasant sounding, term that we often find in our newspapers, applied to some of our old politicians. Their opposition to that dangerous thought was serious and powerful. And through all their fear, and through all their frightened shouting against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved forward, and the country moved with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of those who loved ease and worshipped property, gave the dreadful idea the full authority of national approval. They did this in the form of a resolution. Since we rarely find resolutions written in our own day with anything like this clarity, it may refresh your memory and help my story if I read it. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved. Citizens, your fathers made that resolution real. They succeeded, and today you enjoy the fruits of their success. The freedom they won is yours, and therefore you may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring, bolt in the chain of your still undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, no less than gratitude, lead you to celebrate it, and to keep it always in memory. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ringbolt in the chain of your nation's destiny, and that is exactly how I regard it. Principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on every occasion, in every place, against every enemy, and at any cost. From the round top of your ship of state, dark and threatening clouds can be seen. Heavy waves, like mountains in the distance, reveal on the leeward side huge shapes of hard rock. If that bolt is pulled out, if that chain is broken, all is lost. Cling to this day. Cling to it and to its principles, with the grip of a storm. Tossed sailor holding to a spar at midnight. The birth of a nation, under any circumstances, is an interesting event. But beyond the general reasons for interest, there were special circumstances that make the arrival of this republic especially attractive. As I look back on the whole scene, it was simple, dignified, and sublime. The population of the country at the time was the small number of 3 millions. The country was poor in the supplies of war. The people were weak and scattered, and the land was still an unconquered wilderness. There were then no means for agreement and combined action such as exist now. Neither steam nor lightning had yet been brought under order and discipline. From the Potomac to the Delaware was a journey of many days. Under these disadvantages, and countless others, your fathers declared for liberty and independence, and they triumphed. Fellow citizens, I do not lack respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to bring fame to a great age. It does not often happen that a nation produces, at one time, so many truly great men. The position from which I am compelled to view them is certainly not the most favorable, and yet I cannot think about their great deeds with anything less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes. For the good they did, and for the principles they fought for, I will join you in honoring their memory. They loved their country more than their private interests. Though this is not the highest form of human excellence, everyone will admit that it is a rare virtue, and that when it appears, it deserves respect. A man who knowingly lays down his life for his country is not a man human nature can despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of every other interest. They were men of peace, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not hold back from stirring the nation against oppression. They were patient, but they knew patience had limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. To them, nothing was settled unless it was right. To them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final. Slavery and oppression were not. You may rightly honor the memory of such men. They were great in their own day and generation. Their firm manhood stands out even more clearly when we compare it with these declining times. How careful, exact, and well-measured all their actions were! How unlike the short-lived politicians of an hour! Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and reached with strength into the distant future. They held fast to eternal principles and gave a glorious example in defending them. Look at them. They fully understood the hardship before them. They firmly believed their cause was right. They honorably invited the watching world to examine their conduct. They reverently appealed to heaven to witness their sincerity. They clearly understood the solemn responsibility they were about to take on. They wisely measured the terrible odds against them. And so your fathers, the fathers of this republic, very deliberately, inspired by a glorious patriotism and with a noble faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, laid deep the cornerstone of the national structure that has risen, and still rises, in grandeur around you. This day is the anniversary of that foundational work. Everywhere our eyes meet displays of joyful enthusiasm. Banners and pennants wave proudly in the breeze. The noise of business, too, is quiet. Even Mammon seems to have loosened his grip on this day. The sharp fife and the stirring drum join their sounds with the rising peal of 1,000 church bells. Prayers are offered, hymns are sung, and sermons are preached in honor of this day. Meanwhile, the quick military step of a great and crowded nation, echoed back by all the hills, valleys, and mountains of a vast continent, declares the occasion to be one of thrilling and universal interest, a nation's jubilee. Friends and citizens, I do not need to go any further into the causes that led to this anniversary. Many of you understand them better than I do. You could teach me about them. That is a branch of knowledge in which you perhaps feel a much deeper interest than your speaker does. The causes that led the colonies to separate from the British Crown have never lacked a voice. They have been taught in your common schools, told around your firesides, explained from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls. They are as familiar to you as household words. They form the main material of your national poetry and eloquence. I also remember that, as a people, Americans are remarkably familiar with every fact that favors themselves. Some regard this as a national trait, perhaps even a national weakness. It is a fact that whatever supports the wealth or reputation of Americans, and can be obtained cheaply, Americans will find. I shall not be accused of slandering Americans if I say that I think the American side of any question may safely be left in American hands. Therefore, I leave the great deeds of your fathers to other gentlemen whose claim to regular descent from them will be less likely to be disputed than mine. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God, and with God's cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only so far as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. We are welcome to take from the past every inspiring motive and every noble deed that can help us. But now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, have died, and have done their work, and much of it they did well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers unless your children are to be blessed by your labor. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers as a cover for your own idleness. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within, and God overhead. Sidney Smith tells us that men seldom praise the wisdom and virtues of their fathers except to excuse some folly or wickedness of their own. This truth is not doubtful. Examples of it are near and far, ancient and modern. Hundreds of years ago, it was fashionable for the children of Jacob to boast, "We have Abraham to our father," when they had long since lost Abraham's faith and spirit. That people rested under the shadow of Abraham's great name while rejecting the deeds that made his name great. Need I remind you that the same thing is being done all over this country today? Need I tell you that the Jews are not the only people who built the tombs of the prophets and decorated the graves of the righteous? Washington could not die until he had broken the chains of his slaves. Yet his monument is built up by the price of human blood, and the traitors in the bodies and souls of men shout, "We have Washington to our father." Alas, that it should be so, yet so it is. The evil that men do lives after them, the good is oft interred with their bones. Fellow citizens, pardon me and allow me to ask, why have I been called to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and natural justice, set forth in that Declaration of Independence, extended to us? And have I therefore been invited to bring our humble offering to the national altar, to acknowledge the benefits, and to express sincere gratitude for the blessings that your independence has brought to us? I wish to God, for your sake and for ours, that these questions could truthfully be answered yes. Then my task would be light, and my burden easy and pleasant. For who is so cold that the sympathy of a nation could not warm him? Who is so hardened, so dead to the claims of gratitude, that he would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who is so dull and selfish that he would not add his voice to the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee, when the chains of slavery had been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. In such a case, the mute could speak eloquently, and the lame man leap as an hart. But that is not the case. I say this with a sad awareness of the distance between us. I am not included within the circle of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you rejoice today are not shared by all. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence, handed down by your fathers, is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought lashes and death to me. This 4th July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in chains into the grand, brightly lit temple of liberty, and call on him to join you in joyful songs, would be cruel mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. Let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, rising up to heaven, were cast down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in ruin from which it could never recover. Today I can take up the sorrowful lament of a stripped and grief-stricken people. By the rivers of Babylon there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they who wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your loud national joy, I hear the mournful cry of millions. Their chains, heavy and painful yesterday, are made even more unbearable today by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow today, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to join in with the popular theme, would be the most disgraceful and shocking treason, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall look at this day, and at its popular features, from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identifying myself with the American bondman, making his wrongs my own, I do not hesitate to declare, with all my soul, that the character and conduct of this nation have never looked darker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past, or to the professions of the present, the nation's conduct appears equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly commits herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and with the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of outraged humanity, in the name of chained liberty, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled on, dare to question and denounce, with all the force I can command, everything that helps perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate, I will not excuse, I will use the strongest language I can command. And yet not one word will escape me that any man, whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, will not admit to be right and just. And I imagine I hear someone in my audience say, This is exactly where you and your fellow abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. If you argued more and denounced less, if you persuaded more and rebuked less, your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I answer, where everything is plain, there is nothing to argue. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what part of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I take on the task of proving that the slave is a man? That point is already conceded. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it when they make laws for the slave's government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience by the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he may be, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of those same crimes subject a white man to the same punishment. What is this but an acknowledgment that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted by the fact that Southern statute books are covered with laws forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or write. When you can point to any such laws concerning the beasts of the field, then I may agree to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, the birds of the air, the cattle on your hills, the fish of the sea, and the reptiles that crawl are unable to tell the difference between the slave and a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man.
When Douglass speaks of laws against teaching the enslaved to read, he is not decorating an argument, he is remembering a wound. In Baltimore, after his mistress was forbidden to teach him, he taught himself, trading bread to white boys for lessons. Tyranny, one observes, has always feared the alphabet to 26 small characters, and suddenly the plantation begins to tremble. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. And though Douglass has only begun, he has praised the fathers, claimed the Declaration, and turned the anniversary itself into a witness for the prosecution. In Part 2, the indictment proper, the internal slave trade paraded in open daylight, the fugitive slave law that made every state a hunting ground, the churches that blessed it all, the Constitution reclaimed, and, at the very end, hope. Do join us. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly. And before the lamp goes out, a small request. If something tonight taught you, or surprised you, or simply delighted you, do leave a comment and tell me what it was. And if there is a work, an author, or a tale you should like me to take up next, set it down there as well. I read every one, and many an episode has begun its life as a viewer's suggestion. Until next time.